Hey everyone, welcome to a very special podcast. God, it's weird seeing podcasts talking about Spoiler TV. It's been a very, very long time. But as you can see, right next to me is my previous podcast and Spoiler TV staff member, Bradley. Hey, Bradley.
Hey CJ, it's been a long time. 2 years, 3 years, maybe even
Something like
longer.
that, something like that. But we were chatting the other day, we're like, oh, how much we're loving The Last of Us. And we went, wouldn't it be good to kind of do an overview of the season? And it's like, should we do it as kind of like a visual podcast? And Bradley's like, no, but I convinced him. So here we are. And we thought we'd kind of go through the season one, share our thoughts, share some of your thoughts. So if you're watching in chat, please let us know your opinions and we'll read them out. But it's very rare a show has made myself, and I think Bradley as well, want to actually get back on and talk about something like this. It's impressive. So we'll jump kind of straight into it. And just quick thoughts on season one, Bradley. What were your thoughts on The Last of Us HBO?
Absolutely loved it. I was saying to you before, I didn't really know what to expect. I've not played the game. I wasn't aware of the game. I wasn't really aware of any of the plot, quite frankly. So I've gone in completely blind, and yeah, blown away. There have been some magnificent standalone episodes, as we will come on to. But I think as a kind of whole narrative arc, as well, everything about it really, it's HBO. It's got that kind of high production value. The performances are incredible. It's everything you kind of want from this slot on HBO. They've absolutely knocked it out of the park, and I think a lot of people have been very impressed by it, and I think you have as well.
Yeah, and it's one of those, like, I'm a big gamer, as you can see from my background, the fact that like my PlayStations are there, old Xboxes, the Dreamcast and everything like that. So obviously as soon as I hear we're doing a game adaptation, you just think, oh god, no. And you think back to the likes of the Resident Evil and like Halo, which wasn't bad, wasn't great, and it's kind of like, are they actually going to pull it off? And there's a lot of fans of The Last of Us. And The Last of Us is seen as one of the greatest games ever made in terms of storytelling. And straight away, you just think, are they going to do it justice? And when they announced the fact the director and the producers of the game were going to be involved, everyone was like, they could pull this off. And my first reactions of knowing the story of the game and played the game was, they've done this. This is the standard now for game adaptations, especially now that they're talking about releasing Horizon, which is a game I adore. They're talking about God of War, which is a huge PlayStation property as well. So this is the standard, and hopefully anyone else doing game adaptations will look at this and go, this is what we have to do to keep fans happy and keep, like Bradley, new people interested in this. And we've got Kenobi Plays in the chat as well saying it was great. So there's 3 opinions already saying this has been an absolutely brilliant first season of The Last of Us.
I
Which
think the
brings...
important thing is that, just that, like, as a TV show, say you're coming from a game perspective, I'm coming from a show perspective, and it kind of sets the bar for what HBO drama and what drama should be. The game can be it. The fact that it's come from the game is great, and you're right. This is a kind of high bar for those questionable adaptations. I'm also picturing the Sonic film.
Oh,
You know,
don't
which
even
I knew would
talk
annoy
to
you.
me. Don't even talk to me. Even my camera's going to the side and looking away of what you've just said.
But you think, like, even if you take out the kind of the game narrative or the connection to the game, as I obviously have, as a TV show, it's just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
It's just insane how, I think it's beat everyone's expectations of what this adaptation. We're expecting it to be good, but just we'll talk about it more. Well, actually, why don't we jump straight into it and let's start talking about some of the episodes? And I think, I don't know if you agree, it's probably worth talking about episode 1 and episode 2 as a kind of a combination. Did they release the 2 of them together? I'm trying to
No,
think. No,
several weeks.
but I'd say it's definitely a 2-part story without a doubt. So what were your kind of thoughts on the first 2 episodes as a newbie to the story and not knowing much? How did you feel about episode 1 and 2?
I was really impressed. I think I mean, as a game person, I'm sure you'll possibly agree with this. The opening scene, the talk show, was absolutely staggering. First of all, as a scene, um, very haunting, particularly given that how the real world has lived for the last 3 years. Um, but as I say, I wasn't really aware of any of the plot at all. So to kind of be thrown into this, very surprising. I wasn't sure what to expect. I definitely wasn't expecting a 1960s talk show.
Mm. I don't think anyone was, to be
No,
fair,
no.
but oh,
But
that scene alone was just haunting, I think is the best word of this is like realism.
what's great about it is that you're very much the audience in the sense of that it plays out like a talk show. And what I mean by that is that you've got the two scientists who are having their jokes, and you've got the audience laughter, and the host is having fun. And then you've got that kind of occasional switch into seriousness, and then there's a joke again, and then it goes back into the seriousness, and then it has that, I don't know how to describe it, but it's just that slow, almost fall off a cliff into the seriousness of, well, we'll lose as humanity, and then it's
Mm.
whatever the host says, what it will be back to go to the commercial and into the credits, and you're very much the talk show audience in that moment where you're laughing with the scientist jokes, you like saying no, yes, and then absolutely drawn in because of how well shot it is, how well acted it is, but also because of
Mm.
obviously what we've experienced. And yeah, by the time you get to those credits, you can't help but be hooked, I don't think.
Mm. And it really kind of sets the scene of what to expect in this series, because again, a lot of people are coming into this not knowing what it's about, and then I'm talking about the fungus, the infection. It sets the scene of this isn't like there's the zombie word's banned, these kind of infected people and the impact it's going to have, in that these aren't people anymore, it's controlled by the fungus. I just thought it was such a clever, smart way of introducing the show. Because it's a game, a lot of people thought, oh, it's going to jump straight into the scene with the daughter and the introduction to that, whereas this threw a lot of people into, this is serious, this is a big HBO show, and we are treating it as a serious TV event. And I thought it was a very, very good introduction. And then obviously that leads into the whole Joel and his daughter storyline as well, which was very, very action packed at the very start as well. How did you feel that as an introduction to the world of The Last of Us for you?
Really good. Again, not sure what to expect, and when it comes to Sarah, I knew that Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey were kind of the central characters here,
Mm.
or the central performers anyway. Wasn't expecting her death, I would say, for sure. But there's kind of three parts to this, aren't there? Because you've got the narrative setting, the exposition of that first 5 minutes, and then you've got kind of the very brief natural order of things. You've got this 15-20 minute sequence of the real world, and we know it's why the opening scene works so well, because there's a tension build. You know that the world's going to fall apart. That's just set in stone based on those first 5 minutes. And so you're sat there the whole time thinking, okay, when's it going to happen? What's it going to happen? How's it going to happen? The shot of the old lady next door
Oh,
with
that was horrible.
that is horrifying, and somehow probably doesn't make it into the top 5 horrifying scenes of the season, which says a lot.
Mm.
But yeah, that's the kind of moment, isn't it? There's so much tension building. There's so much worrying about how it all is going to pan out, and then you get to that and you see, right, well, now we're in trouble.
And you've got that 20-year jump after, was it 20 years? I think it's roughly
20 years,
15,
yeah.
20 years after that scene of the world ended pretty much. And now everyone's living in these guarded towns, Fedras, this big control and government organization. You've got the rebels, the Fireflies. And I think the first episode did a really good job of setting the scene, setting the environment for new people coming in. But what I loved about this, as well as the gaming side, is that it didn't stray away from the material. Now, I know a lot of TV shows where we think, well, why are they going to watch it? They already know the story. But most gamers will play the same game over and over again, knowing the story because they love the story. But there's been these little elements that they've just tweaked and changed, changed, where they've changed the story altogether, but just dropped little bits in just to make you go, oh, I didn't see that coming. Oh, that's an interesting take on that whole. And the characters, Joel and Ellie, are slightly different as well, which is very, very interesting that they took that in that direction. But it worked really well for on-screen kind of viewing.
Ellie's introduction, I think, is superb. I don't think I don't know how it. We may have to make game comparisons as we go along here. I don't know how similar that is to the game, but again, not really expecting a 14-year-old child to be chained up to a radiator. Really love the way that she reacts, the way that she acts in that situation, the frustration, the anger, the rebellion that she has against the Fireflies. Really good, and yeah, I mean, it sets the tone for her, doesn't it? You get to the end of the season, as we'll come to, but you can see all the personality traits that we do end up seeing exaggerate throughout the season. We can see them all here.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think episode 1 sets the world, and episode 2 starts to add a bit more of the horror with the introduction of the clickers, and obviously this fungal network all being connected. And if I had to say it, like one of my 2 criticisms of the show is there wasn't much in terms of the horror clicker aspect that maybe some people were expecting. Like, they built this whole plot point of all of the fungus is connected, and it sets them all off, but you never really see that happen again. And maybe that's something they're going to build into season 2. But I thought that was such an interesting kind of idea they had, but then they never built it in again. Like, let's avoid stepping on all of these, and then it just never happens again in future episodes. Maybe when they were in Fedra, when they had that huge hordes attack in a future episode, none of that was kind of linked into it, which was a bit shocking, but it was an interesting kind of dynamic for TV. What did you think of the group of Joel, Tess, and Ellie?
Really liked it. Again, kind of expected it to go on longer than it did. Poor Anna Torv. Yeah, really enjoyable dynamic. Yeah, really enjoyable dynamic. The contrast in early Joel with late Joel, particularly, we'll come to, but it did make for a good contrast, because you've got Joel, who's completely hardened by the world, well, hardened by Sarah's death, actually, but doesn't really have a purpose, doesn't really have a care, apart from Tess, I guess. But he's kind of living day to day. There's no real hope. And then you've got Tess, who is cynical, definitely, and is hardened to this world and certainly will survive, but sees through, the darkness of it, and sees through the hope that Ellie can provide in this circumstance. And so that makes quite a nice comparison, actually, because the risk you run with someone like Joel, and it's the thing that a lot of these apocalypse zombie type shows, it's a trap they can fall into. You need hope. You can't just have this and continue on in bleakness forever. There has to be some sort of hope, some sort of reason to go from one day to the next, rather than just surviving, because that's just not fun to view. So in having Tess for that brief moment, you can see that kind of through line to actually, this is why we're doing this. We have a purpose now. We have a hope. We can save humanity. We can do this. And it doesn't last very long.
No. And I think you talked about hope as well. I think the main theme of this season was always kind of about love, different types of love, friendship, fatherly love, romantic love, and it all kind of ties into those kind of connections as humans, and everyone's motivations, both the evil and the good, all ties down to kind of love. Maybe not David later on in future episodes, but we'll get to him. But it's just, it was very cleverly written. Kenobi's saying it was more character build up than action, which I 100% agree in. And I think at the start, I think character building is really important, because me and Bradley have had this conversation for years. We don't invest in TV shows if within the first few episodes you don't like connect with the characters. It could be the most dynamic, amazing action, but unless we invested in the characters, we aren't going to continue with this journey. And again, in the chat, which I was going to bring up as well later on as well, when we talk about game comparison, a lot of the shots, especially with the clicker, were direct from the game. And afterwards, when we got the cityscape, and they used a lot of the lines from the game as well, which I thought was really cleverly adapted into the show. And it really, the first two episodes really set the scene of, this is what we're doing. We are taking elements of the game, we're taking dialogue from the game, but we're going to build it into this TV environment. And it just worked so well.
Just on the character the action point, I mean, there's two things to this. The first is that if you go, well, in terms of going overboard with action, the first thing is that if you go overboard with action, then none of the action is that interesting. You know, if you're having a 10-minute sequence every episode, for example, then you've got to get very creative very, very quickly in order to keep the investment. We've seen, if you look at the Marvel movies, that all have that kind of big fight sequence at the end, and a lot of them are a little bit samey. You got to, you know, you're invested in the characters more in some cases than not. But it's a bit of a risk, you know, if you keep having these big action set pieces, suddenly they start to lose value. The other thing is that with a particular thing like this, excuse me, you have to get through. If you put these characters into these situations where they're always fighting these hordes of zombies every day, for example, you get to a point where there's no danger ever. And so they don't mean anything, because you have to suspend complete disbelief in thinking, right, well, they've survived 20 zombies today, and tomorrow they're going to survive 20 more zombies. And then on Thursday, they're going to survive 50 more zombies, including a big guy. And then, and it just goes on and on and on, and it doesn't stop. And so when you get the clicker in episode 2 is phenomenal. It is absolutely what tension should be. Was there a couple, or was there just one? I can't remember.
I think there was two.
There was two. And on their own, those two are absolutely terrifying. We get the big horde of zombies later on. We'll come to it. And that's really effective in small doses, because we know that if, I don't know, half the population have turned into zombies or whatever, we know there are going to be big packs of these around. We've seen small snippets of it. We've heard small snippets of it in the first couple of episodes of hundreds of them screaming. That's fine. They can exist in the background. But when it comes to actually facing off, for the sake of reality and for the sake of tension, having one or two that you're trying to avoid or trying to take down before they kill you, so much better.
And obviously, it technically would have killed two of them. But unfortunately, Anatov Puates didn't make it. And that was a big change from the game as well, because it was actually humans that kill her in the game. And it is obviously this horde, but the haunting kind of guy just slowly going over to her and then slowly infecting her. That was a kiss that had a lot of talk on social media, but I think it was more the kind of, that's how this world infects.
I was unaware of that until earlier on. I saw that a lot of people complained about that. I don't really subscribe to that. I think it was fine.
Yeah, like, it didn't bother me. It makes sense, because in the game it's a lot airborne spores, which means half the time in the show they'd be wearing gas masks, which would kind of defeat the point of a TV show. So having the bite in the hole, it infects them via the mouth and things like that, makes total sense.
And we'd seen that in the scene at the start of the episode in Indonesia, I want to say, with Ibi Ratna. That was again haunting. And if they had put Pedro Pascal in Gas Mask, then that would still be more of his face than we see in other Pedro Pascal TV shows.
That
So
is very, very true. But this is the way you make TV shows. But but talking about totally doing something that you don't expect, we have to talk about episode 3. I don't think anybody predicted what episode 3 was going to be about, and the fact that they had Joel and Ellie, everyone's thinking we're going to get Joel and Ellie's story now, and just went, no, you're not. Let's talk about this NPC that we have in the game and a character that's mentioned twice briefly in a chat, and make a whole episode on them. But I'm just going to say it now. I think that is one of the best episodes of TV in the past 10 years. Hands down,
I think I said that it went into my top 3 favorite episodes ever instantly. That was next level. That was Ozymandias International Assassin Mizumonu level of quality. In the 3rd episode of a game adaptation that people were, before learning of the full involvement, a little bit worried about.
But there was nothing to worry about this. Just the story, the acting, the cinematography. It is one of those rare occasions where it's just a perfect episode. And what I love about this episode as well, like people who haven't watched The Last of Us, I've just said, you know what? Even if you don't watch episode 1 and 2, just watch episode 3 as a standalone episode. It's kind of like a short movie. It's like an hour 5 long, hour 10. It was one of the longest episodes, and
Yep.
supposedly there's even more content to it. I'd love for them to release an extended version now. I think an extended version would have been not right for the first time it aired, but now we love the episode. I'd love just to see more of that story developed, but then again, it makes it kind of bittersweet that we get this whole story of them over the years.
I think we see what we need to see. I love it. I just love it so much. Dan Feinberg, the Hollywood reporter, suggested in his initial review of the show that there should be a joint nomination / win for Murray Bartlett and Nick Offerman. And I very much subscribe to this theory because one of them, well, at least one of them, if the Emmys do their job correctly, is going to have to miss out on the guest Emmy. And that's a real shame because they are mesmerizing, absolutely mesmerizing. Nick Offerman, I've watched a couple of the talk show interviews with him, and basically his wife, Megan Mullally, had to not convince him into it, but read the script when he was potentially doing something else and maybe not available to do it. And she was like, no, you have to do this. And yeah, he did have to do this. He is phenomenal. There's a great contrast, isn't there, between the kind of Ron Swanson-esque side of him that he has, the secure bunker, the hating of people, the chance against the government, and then the softest side imaginable. And they both work. And I mean, when it comes to the kind of love story element, it's so beautiful, just so beautiful. Like I don't know what I was expecting from this episode. It certainly wasn't that, but as soon as you get that point where they're playing the piano and you can kind of see his vulnerability, even before then, with the laying out the clothes in the shower and the making of the nice meal, the kind of the presentation around it, it's so powerful.
It's one of the only episodes I think I've watched maybe 2-3 times because I just can't fault it at all. And I'd be absolutely amazed if there is no award nominations for them going forwards. I think the focus will unfortunately be on Nick Offerman, if they're going to choose out of the two of them. But I can't see how either of them would not get nominated for, like, wouldn't be classed as support. Would it be guest or would it be support?
Guest.
Because with it being a full episode, it'd be interesting to see what they can put. They might put one in for guest and one in for supporting.
Nah, supporting, there's Peter McNichol fell foul of this with Veep season 5. He was in 4 or 5 episodes, which was one past the cutoff. He was in like one scene in one additional episode, and that put him past the guest cutoff. Yeah, for one episode they'll go into guest. Supporting will be well, there isn't really a supporting, is there?
No, there's not. Because there's so many guests on there that did so well, which we'll probably get into in some of the Sam and Henry episode 5 stuff as well, and episode 5 and 6. It's just, there's so much we need to talk about cast, which we'll get to very, very soon. But episode 3, we could talk to you guys about for so much. Like, if you want to talk episode 3 for me, please tweet me. I will talk about this episode for hours. I wish we'd done a episode by episode podcast, because I feel we could just talk hours on some of these episodes.
Just throw in with this the music choices, both the Linda Ronstadt song "Long Long Time," which gives the episode its title, beautiful in its 2 usage, I think, phenomenal, love it. And Max Richter on The Nature of Daylight. We know from The Leftovers that as soon as you use Max Richter, it's a cheat code for emotion. And On The Nature of Daylight is the cheat code of the cheat code, I think. I was basically crying for the last 25 minutes watching that episode. It's so perfect and so sad and so beautiful. Like you said, perfect, absolutely perfect episode.
Yeah, and like I said, it's an episode where even if you don't want to watch all of The Last of Us because you don't like horror or anything like that, honestly, this is an episode where you can watch it quite happily as just a one-off, beautiful, short story. But I'm going to stop us, because we will talk about this episode way too much, and we're already halfway through this podcast, and we're only up to episode 3. Episode 4 took a slightly different turn. You've just had this brilliant episode, and then episode 4 had a lot of kind of pressure on it. And personally, I think episode 4 was probably one of the weakest episodes of the season, which is them out on the road. Some great references to the game with like the magazine in the car, and obviously them running into the rebels, or whatever you want to call them, the people that defeated Fedra, led by Kathleen. And I've got a few thoughts about her as well. But episode 4 was very much a relationship building of Joel and Ellie, or at least showing that there's that kind of conflict between them, which at the very end of the episode, you get them laughing, and all of a sudden that bond just kind of builds. But then the episode ends at that point, which is going to be something I want to talk about later on, about their relationship and the building of it. But what were your thoughts on episode 4?
Yeah, definitely the weakest, but I wouldn't call it weak at all. I mean, it's still a great episode.
Oh, yeah.
You're right. The relationship. This is the key thing, isn't it? It's what we just said about the character building. If you've got the first couple of episodes that are introductory, and Joel's hesitance to continue on at the end of episode 2 and 3, to be fair, short of Bill's letter. But you come to this point, and you know, or you think you know, that at some point there's got to be an openness between them. There's got to be some sort of connection between them, because you can't just have either within the world between these two, or as a show, you can't just have these two for 9 episodes where Joel is super closed off, doesn't really care. Ellie, pokes the bear, so to speak, but can't get through, and it's just 9 episodes of that. That's not how this is going to work. So the opening 10 or so minutes of the road trip is really good for this. The way she tries to get him to open up, the jokes she tells, they are your level of jokes, which is great. But yeah, like you say, by the time you come to the end of the you do. I might buy you that book. By the time you come to the end of the episode, you've been through Ellie having to shoot the guy. You've been through Joel almost getting killed there. And yeah, by the time you get to the end of the episode, you can see that something's building between them, and you can see where that relationship is going to not end up going, so to speak, but you can see that there's a path for it.
Definitely. And like I say, it's not a bad episode, but out of a season which is just non-stop like brilliance, it is probably the weakest out of them. But for some TV shows, that would have been like top of the pile of like good. But for The Last of Us, I just feel like it just I can't put my finger on it, but I think it just needed a bit more time to build their relationship in that episode. I think it was quite short. I think it was only about 50 minutes that episode as well. But it was I felt like it was just building up to the whole Sam and Henry bit, which I feel like they could have literally done within the first 15, 20 minutes and spent a bit more time with them, which is a nice little segue to talk about episode 5, which was where we're introduced to Sam and Henry, which I thought was a very nice dynamic. Just swapping the image there for those watching. I really enjoyed the introduction of those characters, the tweak on how the characters communicate as well. I thought that was a really nice touch. And again, they only had one episode to kind of introduce these characters, make us care for them, and then obviously, well, we know. But what did you think of episode 5? It was a very action heavy episode and some really good relationship development as well.
I think, I mean, you mentioned treating episode 1 and 2 as kind of one big episode. I think 4 and 5 are very similar in that 5 doesn't really work as well without 4, and 4 is enhanced by 5. You've got, we kind of brushed over Ellie's shooting of the guy and the kind of the trauma that has and that we don't quite know about yet that comes back for her. But when you look at the Sam and Henry stuff, you've got the Kathleen introductions throughout episode 4, and then you get the nice shot of them holding Joel and Ellie at gunpoint at the end of episode 4. And yeah, the introduction to Sam and Henry is great. I mean, Lamar Johnson and Bella Ramsey both learned some sign language for the role. I think they both said it was quite important that was legitimate.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like they were just using it. It is a great twist. If I think it works, particularly because you've introduced the clickers. And so there is definitely an element here, and I guess in any zombie show, there is a very strong element of which sound plays a factor in your survival.
Yeah.
If you can't hear the zombie sneaking up on you, then you're in trouble. So having that definitely puts a different complexion on things. Having the kind of protective element, they're brothers, but we see from the conversations between Henry and Joel that there is a definite like father figure vibe to it, which really works. And then you get the connection between Sam and Ellie, which is really lovely and slightly different from the game, I think.
Yeah. They do have like a little bit of relationship, but I don't think it's as developed as much as what like this instant connection they had in the show. But it was a key part of the game. So when we know what happens, it does have that impact in the game as well.
Did I read that Sam in the game is slightly older than he is in this?
Yeah, slightly. I'd say slightly. I'm trying to remember because it's been a while since I've played as well.
I think I was reading it earlier. I think that their vibe was basically by making Sam a little bit younger, it kind of adds a bit more credibility to him looking up to Ellie. And you get the connection in terms of she's not really worried about the language barrier. She wants to learn. She wants to engage with him. I think she kind of sees a little bit of herself in him in the sense that she's been locked away and obviously not been able to have a normal life. And in a sense, he's the same. He's not many people can communicate with him or potentially willing to communicate with him because of the fact that he's deaf. And so I think Ellie, in the sort of sympathetic way that she is, very much happy to try and cheer him up, I guess. She's got this positive outlook on the world. He is terrified, quite frankly, and understandably so.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think I would be as well.
And so yeah, I mean the moment in the tunnels where they're playing is really nice, and the Etch a Sketch board is a little bit haunting and sad by the time you get to the end. But again, it's really enjoyable to watch while it lasts, and it's almost the tragedy of the show that it's fun while it lasts, and then it's not going to last, and the ending is devastating.
Yeah, talk about that before we talk about the action scene, the ending as well. The whole obviously being deaf and him sat on the bed. You knew, but because obviously you couldn't hear, just no reaction, just kind of sitting there waiting, and just the just how it all broke down into the whole. Oh, he's just killed him, and straight away I just can't cope with this, and kills himself. That is just a shock that no one expects. Even when you played the game, it's still kind of a it hits hard. It's an emotional scene, and again, for these two newish actors, kind of doing this, and again in a guest role, coming in and doing this, it was brilliant TV. And I've got to say, episode 5 for me is not as good as 3, but it is up there in the fact for story. And it does some brilliant work in terms of action that a lot of people were probably hoping to see more of, linked to the game.
I as soon as she shut the door on that, as soon as she shut the door to go into the bedroom, you just knew what had happened.
Mm.
And similarly, the second that Henry shot Sam, I kind of saw what he was going to do. It felt like the natural endpoint of that tragedy. But you're right; it's still shocking and still really difficult to watch, I think.
Mm.
Yeah,
And just
really
that I'm
brutal.
sorry on the notepad at the end as well is just
Yeah,
heartbreaking. Because she
yeah,
tried to cure him. She thought my blood can heal, and it just it didn't, and it was so sad.
and you've got Joel's sort of regretful look as well, just when he sees it, and then we obviously see it. Yeah, it's good because and the comparison I did see mate was like episode 2 is Joel having to let go Tess when she's been infected, and then this is kind of the version of it for Ellie.
Mm.
They both go through this in the space of a month or so. Yeah, devastating.
Yeah. And what do you think about the action set piece? Because this is pretty much the biggest action scene in the entire series. It's kind of like one of the last times you see even clickers. I'm trying to think. The only time you see the clickers is when it's Riley and Ellie after that, and I don't think there's any more after that for the rest of the show.
Uh, is there one in the finale? I can't remember.
No, there's
Yeah.
none.
This is what I mean when I say the action sequences being few and far between have impact. Because if you did this, aside from the fact that it would cost them loads and take them 4 years to film, I did read that it took them 9 weeks of building the set and 4
Yeah.
weeks of night shoots to actually film a 12-minute sequence. So it would take forever. But again, you lose the impact. If you have, and I think the point was to have as many extras in that hole as they could possibly fit. But when you have 50, 60, 70, however many people it was, climbing out of that hole, the big bloater guy climbing out of that hole and just eviscerating everyone, that has impact. And what's important to me about it is that you see the struggle of survival. It's something we see on these kind of shows a lot where people get into these kind of situations and you don't really get how they manage to survive as easily as they do. This is difficult. This is really difficult. You've got the child chasing Ellie, haunting again, but you've got Ellie who gets out of this so narrowly. Sam who gets bitten. Henry who obviously gets out of it narrowly as well. There is a danger factor to it, and I think that's really important that when you have these sequences, you do make them as great as they are, but you don't go overboard on them because then you say they lose the impact. And this was extraordinary.
Mm. And it's great TV. It's like a nice mixture of story and action that you only get on HBO shows. But I think HBO, looking back now, they thought we'll take a risk with this adaptation and give them 9 episodes. I personally think they're regretting not making this about 15 episodes, investing the money, because they
I'm
would
glad
have.
they didn't. Glad they didn't. We don't need things to go on too long.
I still think it could have, and this is one of my gripes, I still think it could have at least had 2 more episodes just to build the relationship of Ellie and Joel, but we'll get to that. I want to get to that later on. But this camera loves following me around right now. There we go. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed episode 5. Big action set pieces, big character development, which then moves us on to episode 6, where again, it kind of went from up here to just dropping just slightly in pace, but again, a very character relationship building episode for Joel and Ellie, and obviously the return of the brother Tommy. How did you find episode 6?
I think it's possibly the most critical episode in terms of the way the story then plays out. Pedro Pascal, first of all, this is his Emmy nomination, surely. Fabulous throughout. But you've got either side of the visit to the town, you've got the developing relationship. The bit after they leave is really good. You know, we've been through the argument that they had in the town, and there is a kind of, with the exception of the Sarah stuff and his attempted suicide stuff, and obviously Riley for Ellie, there is an openness, a new openness that we've not quite seen yet. So that's really good. But in the actual town, I mean, Joel's concern over his own abilities, which we've seen, and we do obviously see at the end of this one, I think plays a big role. I think his dreams, this is where you solidify his commitment to Ellie, because he has that choice. He gives Ellie that choice, or rather, tries to give her that choice, and she gets angry, and rightly so. And Bella Ramsey is fantastic in that scene too. But the moment he then offers her that choice on the horse of, well, you could still come with me because I felt bad. The second that he does that, locks in the ending for me. There's I don't want to say there's no other way it can go. There's no other way that the Joel Ellie relationship can go other than total commitment and total, I will do literally anything for you beyond that point.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's solidified the relationship as well, which again is something I want to kind of talk about a bit later, their relationship and how it's adapted over the episodes compared to the game. But I thought it was just again very similar to episode 4, was just kind of a storytelling, story building, leading to the next episode. Because I don't think there's much you can talk about in this episode. I want to say 6. Is it episode 6? Yeah.
The one thing I didn't love about it is the near death cliffhanger. I never love these. Like, move the story on slightly. Make it about Ellie. It's difficult because it is a little bit about Ellie's desperation for him to survive at the end there. But it does feel a little bit like, well, you're not really going to kill him, are you? I know you've killed people that we thought were going to be major players before, but you're not really going to kill him, are you?
I think that was just more for the game. People thinking it is a huge part of the story and the whole swapping over of who you control, which was really exciting. So it was a big moment, everyone knowing what was coming. Obviously, the best part is as well, totally different to the game. So a lot of people didn't realize that would be the moment where Joel would be in critical condition in a sense. So the kind again, those little tweaks, those little swaps that just kind of keep the people that know the game and know the story just kind of going, oh, actually, I didn't know that would be it, and I didn't know that, which actually leads to the next episode, which is one of my highlights, which I think will get Bella Ramsey some award nods as well, which is episode 7, which is based on actual DLC and wasn't part of the original story, as it were. It was only reference. Well, the reference we got in the finale is all we knew until they released this DLC. I think that's the way it kind of worked out. So, what were your thoughts on this kind of Ellie focused, Bella Ramsey knocking it out the park once again episode, and with a guest playing Riley as well? The guests on this show have just knew the assignment, and they nailed it. The casting has been brilliant.
Look at you trying to be up with the kids. Storm Reed, yeah, superb, absolutely superb. I mean, this is to Ellie what episode 3 was to Bill and Frank.
Mm.
It's that character study. Slight differentials in obviously we know how it ends, or even as non-game player, we can assume how it ends. We know that Ellie gets
It's
bitten
been
in the
hinted
mall.
at, yeah.
Yeah, we know Ellie gets bitten at in the mall. As soon as she goes with Riley, you kind of think, well, she's not getting through this, is she? We've not heard her mentioned apart from that one scene in the premiere. We've not seen her. She's doomed. Yeah, wonderful. I've written down Emmy for Ramsey, please. I could have said this about many of the episodes, but particularly this one. I mean, she's just extraordinary. She's just extraordinary. The flashbacks are so beautifully paced. You've got the kind of the troublemakings at the start. You've got the reluctance to go with Riley and everything we know about her and everything Riley knows about how she's going to go with her, obviously. And when you get to the mall, again, it's the kind of it's the ticking time bomb. You know that it's going to happen. You know that something's going to happen with a clicker at some point.
Mm.
It's just when. And so there's a great blend of tension because you the whole time, as much as I wanted to kind of be in glee at how happy Ellie was at this incredible experience. By the way, escalators, we take them for granted. They're really cool.
Yeah.
I could have
just had half an hour of just that going up.
I'd have happily watched Ellie enjoying the escalator for a long time. But yeah, there's a glee that you want to have for the way that Ellie's experiencing this, and you just can't. It's just impossible because you know at some point around one of these corners something's going to come out and bite them. Quite literally.
Did you like the little trick with the screaming and how you thought that was going to be the whole? I thought that was a clever little thing.
Yeah, really good. Really impressed with that. Yeah, love that. I mean, we've got some photos here of some of Ellie's reactions. I just the way that Bella Ramsey uses her face and her expressions in this episode, so good. You can see she just won Performer of the Month for SpoilerTV, or the staff version anyway, and I definitely voted for her.
I did as well.
Yeah, you've got the kind of the half smile, and you can see the nervousness through that, and then you've got kind of like the stone face, and you can see like the love she has for Riley through that. You've got the grin that she has on her face after they kiss, and Riley says that she was fine with it, is genuinely lit up the screen brighter than the mall at the start of this whole sequence. It was so illuminating, and also the perfect moment to ruin everything.
Yeah, it's like the Joss Whedon Buffy thing, saying, "Look, they're finally happy. Let's kill one of them." But
happiness is a myth.
But the thing that The Last of Us has done so well is, one, they've just got the casting great, so you instantly want to know more about these characters. And in fact, if you think in 50 minutes you are invested in this guest actor, this story, and then even though you know what's coming, you know they're only in it an episode, you know what's happening, it still hits you. And every episode they've kind of got that, well, maybe not episode 4, but every episode they've kind of got that bit that's like, right, how am I going to hit you? How am I going to hit you? And it kind of comes back to that whole theme of it's about love, friendship, romance, family, all about love. What are people willing to do? And again, this whole we'll sit and we'll be poetic and we'll go crazy together is such a sad thing, especially that we know Ellie was going to be fine, but they didn't. And the fact that one of them knew they'd have to be the one that kills the other one is such a horrible. And actually, I'm really glad they didn't show that scene. I think just that in your imagination is hard enough, than let alone seeing it on the screen, which I thought they were going to show it in the finale, actually, where she's talking about it and you'd see the shot. But again, they've kind of kept it in our minds, which again, I think sometimes it's better. The less you see, sometimes it's better.
Yeah, you needed the feeling of what actually happened at the mall, how she got bit, all that stuff. You don't need to see Riley being killed. As you know, she's been bitten. We know what happens next. Like we've said it enough. That's fine. What I love as well is the contrast between the two Ellies. You've got the kind of pure child, which being in this apocalyptic scenario doesn't get to happen very much for anyone, particularly Ellie. But she has this pure child for however long it is in the mall. And bookending the episode is the maturity and the fact that she's forced to grow up instantly in this world and in this situation. I just love that contrast. I've been trying not to mention this show, but it reminds me of The Walking Dead in the
How dare you mention that show here? This has nothing to do with zombies. These are infected people, not the Z word.
I'm reminded of when Carl ate that entire tub of ice cream and lost a fight with a door just after the prison had been ransacked. And I mean, he'd been in that world a lot, and he was doing that. And you know, it was traumatic, fine, I'll give you that. But yeah, the contrast between the way that show would handle something like this and the way that The Last of Us has with Ellie is stark, to say the least.
Yeah, but again, it's just so interesting watching this pan out and seeing the story of Ellie and why she is the way she is, the story of Joel and why the way he is. They've both suffered loss. They've lost someone where they've got that kind of connection, and Ellie is like the daughter. And fair enough, it's not that Riley and Joel are the same thing, but it's that whole bond, that someone you trust, the someone you will basically, as Ellie says in the finale, I will follow you anywhere. She wanted to do the same with Riley, and she'd followed her anywhere. And they've kind of, and I think in the finale, which we'll get to, Joel say it wasn't time that fixed me, it was something else. And I feel like in that moment, Ellie kind of felt the same. Like, I've been broken, and now I'm back. I'm feeling a bit more like I was not too long ago. To move on to the next episode, because I'm aware of time, we do like to chat a lot when me and Bradley get on podcasts. Episode 8, which introduces us to a character called David, which is a big character in the game. It's a huge kind of story arc for Ellie. But again, it was one episode. We saw Troy Baker, who was the original voice of Joel, playing James. Really nice guy in person. I've interviewed him a few times about this game, and him talking about this story. You couldn't say much, but hinting about the character he's playing and it being a very dark, interesting kind of character. And obviously, the introduction of David is haunting. And again, it's one of those. He is pure evil. There's no arguments. And that little kind of revelation at the end of the episode of what he is actually like, I get. But the bit that I do kind of understand is the fact that they turned to eating humans. I kind of understand that, as in, if we don't, we'll all starve. Not my personal preference, but I can understand why they kind of went that route. But David was just pure evil. That's what made it worse. If it was a character you could connect with that says, look, I'm looking after these people as in a tough situation. This is what we had to do to survive. They don't know. They're none of the wiser. You could kind of go, all right, fair enough. You did what you did to survive. But again, I'm using this word, pure evil. What did you think of the 8th episode?
Well, it's what he tries to pitch himself as, doesn't he? He tries to pitch himself as this kind of this savior, this guy that's been reduced to doing desperate things. Didn't want to do them, but other people relying on him, so he had to. I mean, it's sickening. The whole thing is sickening. And what I love about it, and we've talked about the kind of lack of the infected. This is really effective at that old thing of, well, in an apocalypse, in a zombie apocalypse, the humans are the more dangerous. Because the infected, they only have one goal. really, and that's just that, we consider them mindless. They're just coming to kill you. If
Tongue
you
you
see
like
one,
Anatov. Yeah.
yeah, they're just gonna rampage. They're gonna come after you, and they're gonna bite you. That's simple. When it comes to humans, you've got so many more dynamics. You've got the kind of self-survival instinct. You've got, in this case, people relying on David to keep them safe. You've got all sorts of motivations that people have, and when you're in a situation where resources are scarce, other people are scarce, you don't get what you want very often, people will go like this. It's that feral thing, and yeah, I mean, horrifying, absolutely horrifying. Worse, more horrifying than anything the zombies can do, because there's a reality to this, right?
That's the scary part. People would just look to whoever has kind of shown, I can get you what you need. It all comes down to survival. This person is providing us food, it's helping us with shelter, they're making the decisions. And if you're not the type of person to do that, you will just follow. You will turn a blind eye to how they're doing that because you are alive in dire situations. And
And
it's scary, but it'd happen.
yeah, and it's hard to. My thing with it is that it's hard to kind of picture zombies like that in our reality, but we know that cannibals exist. We know that rapists exist, and so
Mm.
when you invoke that into the show, suddenly there's a kind of grounded element to it.
Yeah, and the fact that these people survive, like you think, oh, well, those people don't survive, but in a lot of these shows, those are the types of people that do survive because it's a dog eat dog world and they don't have the morality to go, well, if I can do this, I don't care. And they will kind of be the ones that take power over the weak. It's horrible, but that's what would happen in this situation. And it's like the character of James is, you can see he's like, I think David even says to him, are you still a believer? Do you still follow me? And James is kind of like, yeah, as in he's just doing it to survive. He's not happy, but he knows if he doesn't, he'll be the next one on the chopping board. And it's
Yeah,
kind of, it's better to be with the bad guy than against the bad guy in this world situation. And it's a horrible, horrible thing to think that what would you do in that situation? And it really gets you thinking about the morality of it all. Of who would you stick by, where would you go? But the torture scene as well, of Joel getting brutal, and it shows what would Joel do in order to protect Ellie, which kind of sets it up for the finale of he. I think a
anything.
lot of, yeah, and I think a lot of people forget Joel is not the good guy in this.
No, he is. He's our protagonist, and he's the good
Mm.
guy in the sense of we follow him trying to protect Ellie. But and he is the main guy in the game that you play as. So you've got a few elements to this, but yeah, he's not good at all. This is what I mean with episode 6, that you don't. Obviously, if he stays in the town, you don't get this. But if you don't have that whole argument, if you don't have that total commitment that he has to reaffirm at that point, you don't get this.
It's
But
scary. It's
yeah,
scary what people will do in these situations.
I
But
mean,
it's that
again,
grey area, isn't it? It's kind of like morally grey, as in like these people attack them. He needs to save Ellie. He's torturing them. He could have just left them tied up, but he knows in this reality, people escape from being tied up. There's an extra 2 people that could come back and kill him.
I think there's an anger element to it as well, to be honest.
Mm.
But I mean, again, Bella Ramsey, Pascal too, but Bella Ramsey especially, again, just next level, absolutely next level. That the whole sequence in the church on fire, him kind of hunting around. I'm reminded of Hannibal, for fairly obvious reasons, I'd say,
Mm.
but it is again terrifying, and I really love. You get that shot. I don't know what it's like in terms of playing it in the game, but that shot of her over him, hacking him to death, the nice shots of blood coming onto the camera. It again, that felt so game
In the
like.
game, Joel pulls her off him. But in the TV show, we don't know how long she's been in there when she comes out to Joel. So it could be an hour, it could be a bit longer. We honestly don't know, but that's the slight difference. But again, it worked for the TV show.
Yeah, and it leads us on. It'll lead us on to episode 9, but I think it does have the most important line in the whole show, which is the baby girl line. It
That
reinforces
shows
everything that I just said about episode 6. Reinforces that again. If it wasn't, I don't know if it's necessarily apparent in episode 6 what I've just said. By the time you have that line and the end of this episode, it is apparent. There is nothing that he will not do.
Yeah, 100%, which is a nice segue into obviously our final episode that just aired yesterday, and I quickly watched today ready for the podcast. Episode 9, the finale, which has one of my favorite scenes from the game as well. I am so happy, and there would have been uproar if this scene was not in, and it's a giraffe scene, which I think is just like one. It's just it's like this cute kind of, they're both smiling, they're both enjoying this kind of, it's kind of like the father taking the daughter to the zoo for the very first time, that kind of contrast. And then it just flips on its head what happens next, and that contrast between the father daughter going to the zoo to the father's going to get his daughter back and protect at all costs. A lot of people thought that the finale was could have been 2 parts, um and like focused on more Joel trying to get them, but it was kind of rushed. But I kind of understand why they've done it this way. If I think the actual action was only about 5-10 minutes. In the last sort of, there was 15 minutes left roughly when he decides to go off on the rampage, which is a really interesting way of doing the finale. I think a lot of people are expecting a whole episode of him going through. But again, what were your thoughts on the finale, this kind of conclusion to season 1 and game 1?
Well, first of all, the giraffe, superb CGI and stunning to look at. That whole setting, just beautiful. It felt like the game, or it felt
Well,
like a
that
gamescape.
view.
Yeah, so good. I don't think this needs to be longer at all. I think this worked exactly as it did. I don't think it's difficult because I guess from a kind of gamer's perspective, that sequence will feel a lot longer, right? Because you're kind of slowly going through the building, you're taking out the people, and you can't in a game you can't really jump from A to B that quickly. You have to do it, right? That's the objective is kill the people and save Ellie. So you have to kill all the people and save Ellie. Whereas I think it's more impactful with this. You don't need to show every person dying. You show enough. You show him breaking free. You show him going through, the guy that surrenders and still gets shot. There's enough impact in this that you don't need to see everyone getting killed. There's a smartness to reducing this, and yeah, the score particularly, I think it's stolen from the game, is perfect, absolutely perfect.
Yeah, same composer as well.
Yeah,
in case you weren't aware.
Yeah, it's like I've made this comparison before, I think, but like, do you remember the action sequence in the season 1 finale of 24 on the docks?
Yeah.
And I think I've read this before with Sean Callery, who composed that they went for this kind of melancholy score. Jack thinks his daughter's dead, and he's on this kind of revenge, I've got nothing else to live for rampage. It's not a big bombastic action sequence. This is the exact same. This is the absolute nadir of Joel's character. Because he is, in this moment, dooming any hope that humanity has. This is not a moment to be celebrated. This is, as you said, he's not the good guy here. He is the bad guy. He is the worst guy in this situation. And so
it's self-driven, it's selfish. It's like, I need this girl in my life. And it's not about the whole, and I think what's her name? Marsha? No, I keep forgetting her name. Marlene, that's it. I knew a big name. She even says that herself. She is going to die at some point. She will get attacked, she will get shot or something like that. Why let that happen when actually she could die now and save the world? Give her that option. But she's not given that option. And is that going to be a problem in the future?
Well, Yeah, I guess that's season two.
Mm.
Yeah, so the whole thing is haunting. It's genuinely quite sickening to watch when you think about it. And I've seen a couple of people say that I think it's supposedly quite common when you play the game to be on Joel's side in terms
Mm.
of thinking like, well, I like Ellie as a character, I want to go and save her, and then almost either on a replay or on a rethink, you actually realize, hang on a minute, no, that's wrong.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough call, but it's the whole father-daughter thing. And I'm just aware of the time because we kind of ran over. But we have talked about the game comparison, the cast and characters as we went through. We're going to do those as separate sections. What I want to kind of finish on is kind of like your strengths and what you think are areas that maybe they could have developed or improved over season one. Or are you just quite happy with the way season one as a whole has been? So what kind of like your overall conclusive thoughts on season one as a whole?
I love it. I think we're going to get a second season, and I have no idea at all what kind of story this will take. I didn't know that at the start of this season, to be fair. But I think if you were to take this show as a self-contained thing, and the game wasn't it? Because they didn't announce the
Hmm.
sequel until years later. It ended with Ellie saying okay, and again, perfect ending. I think HBO asked them to film a softer ending, and they just didn't use it because that would be
Yeah,
stupid. Um, I think as a self-contained 9 episodes of television, not far short of being perfect.
yeah, I kind of agree. The only kind of gripe I have is I don't think there was enough time spent on the Joel Ellie relationship. If you think about it, first episode wasn't really much time with them. Second episode, it was more about them kind of building the whole you have to protect Ellie. Episode three, no focus on the relationship at all. So if you think a third of the episodes, not I'm not about the Joel Ellie relationship.
I think there is in that though, isn't there? There's a bit
There's a little bit,
there's a bit
but
at the end which is significant enough.
by the end, we've got to believe this is a father-daughter dynamic, and there's little scenes here and there. But if you think you've got episode four, which kind of builds the relationship, episode five, not really, because this kind of spend time with the other people. Episode six, if anything, breaks down the relationship until the end because he's saying he doesn't want to have her anymore. Episode seven, he's stabbed, he's unconscious. Episode eight, they only get together when he's stabbed. Episode nine, at that point, he's meant to be the dad. And I feel like maybe they just needed another episode or at least two more episodes to just build, because the game is perfect. As you've got 20, 30 hours where you see this relationship build and it makes sense. And I just feel, and you're totally right in saying you don't want to drag something out for too long. 100% agree. But I feel they just needed another episode just to kind of really show that relationship between them. Because if someone actually worked it out how many scenes they actually have together, I don't think it's actually that much of the season.
No, I mean there are time jumps that we don't see. I think the finale takes place
Mm.
a couple of months after the events of David. Um,
But I think
I
one episode here or there just to show the relationship building, I think would have just helped. Like, don't get us wrong, this is like 9 out of 10 for the whole season for me. Hands down, one of the best seasons of TV. Just that I feel like it just needed to build that relationship a little bit more, which you get in the game, and it would have been perfect. Like a 10 out of 10. Hands down.
yeah, I can see your point. I don't think I was ever not sold on it though. I think by the time we
Hmm.
get to um,
Oh, I
well,
believed it. I totally
yeah,
believed it. I
yeah.
just think I wanted to see more of that relationship, as it were. I was
Oh,
invested in these characters. I wanted to see more of that relationship and how they got there. What they did worked. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I just wanted just to see a bit more to solidify it.
oh yeah. I'd happily watch Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey on screen together a lot more. That is their dynamic is just great.
I think two more episodes of just them kind of going about and kind of having those problems, maybe dragging some like the David story. Like we had the first two episodes, which were kind of a two-parter, the Sam and Henry, which is kind of a two-parter. I feel like the whole David thing could have been stretched, but then again, Joel and Ellie might not be together. But maybe the aftermath of that and just seeing that journey afterwards and how their relationship, the bond before it gets to the finale. So when he gets to the hospital, this is why he is going all out for them. I just feel like maybe there could have been another episode to build that. But other than that, I think it's one of the best seasons of TV we've had in a good few years.
Yeah, this as a first season for, like you say, a game adaptation that is risky whenever you adapt things like this. Phenomenal. They've absolutely smashed this. I say I don't know, having watched this, where season 2 goes. I don't want to know, frankly. I've spent
avoid season 2 spoilers, because the story for season 2 is was a bit controversial, and it's longer. So a lot of people are theorizing that actually the next game is going to be season 2 and season 3. I won't say why. There is a reason why it might be that. But to avoid spoilers the best that you can. I think you will really enjoy this season's.
I have been trying to avoid this season as much as possible. I read quite early on that there was a big twist at the end that people were hoping that they would follow through with, which presumably was the fact that they would have to kill Ellie. And I'm very glad that I avoided that, because that would have been... I mean, I should have predicted it at some point, but it would have been very sad to have learned that ahead of time. Yeah, as seasons go, this very impressive. Really, really happy with this.
Yeah, and it even got my daughter's seal of approval as well. She's been like, we've got to watch the episode. Can we watch the episode? We're going to watch the finale." So we like literally watched it together, and she absolutely adored the finale as well. And but yeah, overall, I think this is a really good season. When the next season comes out, which would probably be I reckon it'll be 2 years until this next season comes out.
I'm pretty sure they've said it's going to take probably 18 months at least. I mean, they filmed this in sort of early 2021.
Mm. Yeah, and I think it will help as well to the age Ellie up a little bit as well, Bella. I don't think she's going to look much older, because I think she's 19 now. So maybe by the time start film, she'll be in 2021. So she might have that little bit more age, which obviously happens in the game, but not by much. So it'll be interesting. But I'll be quite happy when this comes out for us to do like a weekly episode analysis, because we could quite happily talk about this show moving forwards. But I will end it there, because we've done about an hour and 15 minutes. Thank you, Bradley. If anybody wants to kind of check what articles you've got coming out on SpoilerTV and everything like that, is there any socials people can follow you on?
Yeah, it's Bradley_Adams TV on Twitter, I think. There's an underscore in there somewhere.
Yeah, I believe it is the Bradley_Adams, yes.
Yeah.
So we'll look after your social media, but you can find all of Bradley's articles under the initials BA in the label section, so please check that out. It is very, very rare you will see me post articles on SpoilerTV, so when I do, you know it's always the best articles, like this one. But no, it's been great catching up with Bradley podcast-wise as well. It's been a blast from the past, and just seeing how much we both aged over the years. Which Bradley kindly reminded me of. Thanks for that. But no, it's been great. If anyone wants to chat with me as well, just CJ the Geek on everything. But thank you so much if you've watched. Thank you if you've watched this retrospectively as well. We do appreciate it. And we'd love to see your comments in the article or on the YouTube comments as well, so you can share your thoughts. And if you'd like us to do more of these, like, I don't know if you watched The Mandalorian, Bradley.
I do. I haven't watched season 3 yet.
Why don't we maybe pencil in maybe doing a season 3 Mandalorian one as well? Because that'd be quite an interesting one to do, and see if anybody else wants to join. But that could be fun.
Are we just going to talk about Pedro Pascal's TV shows for the rest
of
the
time?
It is
the Pedro Pascal podcast, the 3 Ps.
Great. I'm on board with this.
Cool. Sounds good. But no, thank you everyone for joining us. It's been great fun doing something like this again, and hopefully we'll get to jump on and do more of this in future. But for now, it's bye from us.